What is the most creepiest thing you saw, even though you are very skeptical about paranormal things? This happened back when we were like in 3rd grade. It was around 7 p.m, right when the sun was almost set. My cousins swore that one of my grandma's friends was in their backyard, knocking on the window in their room and trying to talk to them. Although not entirely strange for her to be back there, she regularly helped my grandma with her garden. At this point she had been reported missing and nobody even knew where she was. It was only later that we learned she was already dead sometime that morning. She had been stabbed several times and her body found in a dumpster nearby. I don't know who the duck my cousins saw that night. Something like that happened to my mother-in-law. It's like the dead come to see whoever they want before they leave to the afterlife. My aunt died, and my other aunt B, her sister, was packing her things ready to go to the funeral. Her son, my cousin, asked her who that woman was in that red dress in his room. Of course my aunt D was confused. My cousin didn't really know Aunt Anne that well. When they went to the funeral, you know what color my dead Aunt Anne was wearing in her casket? Red. The girl I was babysitting one night came running out of her room crying, saying something was walking by her window. Now I get a lot of creepy stories and things from the kids I babysit. They have crazy imagination. So I go check, not really thinking anything. Something runs by the window as I'm checking it out. A distinctly humanoid figure. At this point I needed a diaper as much as the little girl I was babysitting. So I text the parents asking about it. And no shit, this is the response I get. Oh my god, you saw it too? Yeah, right, cried. Called the cops too. They came by and said they didn't see anything around. The thing is, the parents had called the cops several times before too for the same reason. One of the freakiest times I've ever babysat. I was about 10 years old when me and my friend went to say hello to his mum, who was working as a barmaid in one of the local pubs. The pub was built in 1461, so it has a good amount of history. After saying hello to his mum, we went to leave and noticed the cellar door was open. Being curious 10-year-olds and out of earshot of any adults, we decided to sneak down and have a cheeky look around. When we got down there, it was kind of how you would expect, just loads of barrels of booze and storage for other bits and pieces. But suddenly we hear this "excuse me" from behind us. We spin around and there is a lady in the cellar. She says to us, "You shouldn't be down here," and we should go back upstairs quickly. We do as we are told, and as we are exiting the cellar, we are caught red-handed by the landlord of the pub, who asks us what we were doing in the cellar. We explain we just wanted to see what was down there, but the lady told us to go back upstairs. He looked a little confused by this and asked what lady, before venturing down into the cellar himself. A few minutes passed, and when he came back he told us there was nobody down there and to stop messing around, at which point we left the building to go and do other things. The thing I remember is the lady was dressed in an old-timey maid's outfit that you would see in a British Victorian period drama. I also remember she didn't feel threatening or scary, but rather kind and gentle. I messaged my friend about this a few weeks ago, 26 years later, and he remembered it clearly. I have heard several people talk about a maid or servant who was pushed down or fell down the cellar stairs and broke her neck. So in conclusion, it was either the ghost of a Victorian servant or the landlord was doing kinky stuff with someone in the cellar, and we arrived at an inconvenient time. A handful of times, I would feel the corner of the bed lower, as if someone sat down on it. Whenever it happened, I would refuse to turn over and just face the wall until I fell asleep. That was over 25 years ago. My aunt has a story of her and her siblings sharing the same experience while in 3 separate rooms. My aunt and I were driving in the town she went to school in. We drove past a house and I remarked how bad it looked. She replied, "It is worse inside. That place is haunted." I had never heard my aunt talk of anything paranormal, and I haven't since. The story goes that the 3 of them rented out some sketchy house while going to school. Apparently, strange things would happen that made them feel uncomfortable, but never anything crazy. They would all notice on a few occasions they would wake up in the night with the blankets off and at the foot of the bed. Nothing strange. People kick of blankets when they get too hot all the time. One night, My aunt recounts that she had a dream she was falling and needed to grab onto something to save herself. She suddenly realized that she wasn't dreaming and she was being pulled by her ankles out of her bed. She grabbed the rails of the headboard, and after a few horrifying moments she gets the strength to scream. At the same time she hears screams from her siblings' rooms. Just as soon as it started, the feeling ended and she ran to check on them. They all had the same feeling of being pulled out of their bed. Needless to say they moved out and didn't look back. Was working as an EMT in a rural small town for a few years. Was up late after a run finishing my report when I started hearing someone come down some wooden stairs in the bay about 40 feet from me. The stairs go up to a training room and it's just me and my partner there. I go look. Nothing there. I go sit back down and try to finish the report. Sound gets loud and fast down the stairs, so I just get up and start walking out when the plug-in for the ambulance just shoots out and crashes against the wall. Decided to finish my reports in the bunk rooms. Had a room in our hotel where a murder occurred. Got multiple complaints that the sheets have blood stains and the lights won't turn on from different guests every couple weeks. Whenever we check the room, no issues. One time after moving the guests, got a noise complaint that there was screaming coming from the room. Check the room. Empty. Listened to the neighbors' rooms and didn't note any noise either. We had never publicly released that the murder occurred in that room. And nobody but staff knew. I'm skeptical, but creeped me out. Going to visit grandfather's grave when I was in my mid-20s. My grandfather was buried in a really old graveyard, where the oldest graves were in the center like before Civil War times. It was really in the boonies, so it's like middle of nowhere with old church type graveyard. Anyway, you have to walk the graveyard and my grandfather is buried way in the back, so I hike up and say a few things and enjoy the quiet for a while. Then start back down and detour a bit to look at some of the old gravestones. There is this one particular huge gravestone in the exact center. Just massive compared to the others, which looks like a giant cut of rock was stood on end and the marking were simply chiseled in. It also is the only grave marking with an old iron fence around the plot, so it is really overgrown in comparison to the well-maintained plots. So I amble over and look at this and try to read it, but the grass is really blocking the date, so I lean over the fence to brush aside and look for details. And just as I read 1790, something rattles right next to my ear. Immediately, I think rattlesnake and jerk up. And as I do, something pushed me back hard. I actually skidded back about 3 feet and landed on my butt. I kinda freak a bit, looking around and trying to figure out what the heck happened. I looked down at the base of the grave trying to see if I saw a snake or something, and then blinked because something was wrong. I couldn't figure it out at once, then sorta shuddered and then really looked. And there was something causing the air to blur in front of me when I looked at the grave, but had edges so everything was clear around it. I suddenly broke out in a cold sweat but scooted back so fast I hit my tailbone on a gravestone. I jumped up and half ran down the hill to the bridge to the parking lot and stopped right when I got to it to calm a bit. And then I turned around and looked up, and I saw the air blur moving down the hill between the goddamn stones toward me, and it was vaguely human shaped. I could literally see the ducking movement as details went blurry and ref accused as it moved. It wasn't fast, but it was coming. That did it. I tore ass across the bridge, jumped in my car, and burned rubber out of the lot. It's been nearly 20 something years since that time, and even typing this has got me jittery. Just thinking about seeing the world blurred without any reason to it. And it's moving toward you. Christ. I didn't see anything, but in my old house I would be laying in bed watching TV at 2-3 am and could distinctly hear someone wearing heavy boots walk from the bathroom to the kitchen. They would do it 4 or 5 times, then it would stop. At first I thought it was my mom or my grandma. I lived with both, and I would go check to see what they were doing up so late, but no one was ever there. One day at dinner I brought it up to them, and my grandma had told me she had heard the same footsteps since she first moved in. I'm pretty skeptical. The house was old and creaky, it could have been anything, but it sounded just like human footsteps, and I can't explain the repetition. Usually in a creaky house you'll hear 1, or to sounds, then it goes away. So I'm one of those guys who likes to explore abandoned places for fun. I'd normally go with someone else, but this particular time I went alone to an old, abandoned children's polio hospital near where I live. It was in the process of demolition and most of it was gone. Only 3 parts of the original building were still standing. Anyway, I entered the largest building, 2 stories, each made up of a long hallway with rooms off to the sides. The windows were blocked off, so it was dark inside. I was kind of apprehensive about going in, especially since I was alone. But I thought, since I'm here, might as well. Not much happened until I got to one of the last rooms on the top story hallway. I went in and just felt like I needed to get the duck out of there fast. No real reason behind the feeling. I just knew something wasn't right. I walk out and head down the hallway when I hear this noise. Sounded like a machine whirring with some kind of voice mixed in there, making this groaning sound. It stopped, started, stopped, started with regular intervals. It was coming from the room I was just in, the one that didn't feel right. Needless to say, I was shitting myself with fear. Legged it down the hallway and out the building. Weirdest shit I've experienced. Keep in mind I was father-in-lawing the whole thing, so I've got proof if anyone wants it. One night, I was driving the car with my friend in the passenger seat. We were taking back roads just listening to music. There was nobody else around, and the stretch we were in was without street lights. Out of nowhere, 2 glaring lights shined in the rear view mirror. I swear, I looked at the mirror and saw a car right behind me. Since nobody had been around just seconds ago, I assumed the car must be driving pretty ducking fast. So I floored it. I braced myself for impact. A second later, when nothing happened, I looked back at the rear view mirror. There was nothing but the faint red from my own tail lights. I slowed and told my friend what I just saw. She admitted she did not see any such lights. She did, however, get a creepy feeling and shivered just moments before I saw it. The cherry on top, the road we were on is one that my driver's ed instructor had me drive on 16 long years ago. On that same stretch of road, he was telling me a story about some teen who was driving recklessly and drunk on that street. He went on describing the kid and how he went driving along with his buddies up until we came to a slight curve and he pointed to a memorial cross on the side of the road, and that's where he crashed. My skeptical brain wants to chalk these headlights up to a hallucination, but I've never had a visual hallucination before. It's been years since this event occurred and this most plausible explanation still doesn't make sense. The one and only time in my 32 years that I've ever had a hallucination just happened to be when my friend got the shudders as we were driving down this same road. I mean, I think that's still more likely than ghosts, but this was the one thing I've experienced that I really can't figure out. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.